Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Rwanda is not put off by the prospect of sanctions or diplomatic isolation for its role in the insurgency in DR Congo. The ICC's chief prosecutor, meanwhile, is in Kinshasa investigating the scope of M23 rebels' recent takeover as people in seized Goma in the east face a cash crisis. Also, despite the tensions between Rwanda and DRC, many Congolese have had to flee over the border into Kigali. There, a community of artists are trying to circumvent the diplomatic enmity and foster compassion and collaboration between their countries in their own way. In the run-up to the historic African hosting of the G20 later this year, finance ministers head to Cape Town to unpack the impact of the US's American First policy on the world economy. South Africa's leader warns that the shift threatens global growth. But first, on Wednesday, Rwanda's foreign minister said that his country is not afraid of the mounting diplomatic pressure over its role in M23 rebels' advance through neighbouring DR Congo. The UK is suspending aid to Rwanda for its backing of the insurgents, and Kinshasa is lobbying partners to stop supporting Kigali. More than 7,000 people have been killed since the militia started seizing cities in Eastern DRC this year. Regional troops have been backing the Congolese army with little success. South Africa finished evacuating 127 wounded soldiers from the front line on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor is in the Congolese capital and spoke to France 24. Our Catherine Norris-Trent tells us more.
Karim Khan spent 2 days in the Congolese capital meeting with officials, notably the president, Felix Tshisekedi. But this was also a visit designed to send a message that the ICC intended to crack down on what Karim Khan called the impunity gap for crimes committed in the DRC. And as the deadly conflict continues in the east with a multitude of armed groups present in the zone, the Congolese government has made a second referral to the ICC. When asked by France 24 how he and his team intended to investigate and prosecute crimes in such a dangerous and volatile zone, Karim Khan admitted that it was a challenge, but said the ICC were going to be using a number of investigative techniques, including an online platform where anyone can report crimes. Karim Khan did not want to be drawn on whether he'd recently spoken to Rwandan President Paul Kagame, nor whether he intended to visit Kigali. The UN has reported that some 4,000 Rwandan troops are present in the Eastern DRC. But the prosecutor did announce that concrete steps will be taken towards setting up a special court for the DRC. It seems it would be a bilateral hybrid arrangement, rather, in conjunction with the ICC, an idea that has been in the pipeline for a long time.
The DRC will host an international conference to create a special court for the DRC. This is the aim, and we will technically try to support that, and at the same time we'll seek to move forward with our own responsibilities as a court of last resort to shoulder our responsibilities in relation to what we are investigating. But what we have to do is draw the poison from different warlords and different armed groups that are laying siege to the DRC, that are terrorizing different civilians in different parts of the country, and make sure they are subjected to accountability. And it's about time.
So no concrete details yet on exactly when that conference would be, nor on how the special court for the DRC would function. But it does mark a step forwards towards setting one up. And meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in the east for civilians there worsens there by the day.
And you can catch France 24's full interview with Karim Khan on Friday. Now, Goma was and is really important to DRC's economy and the logistics of the entirety of Eastern DRC. Apart from the loss of life of the M23's advance, the seizure of Goma has snarled up the flow of money and more in the region. Our Clarice Fortuny tells us more.
This is what the inhabitants of Goma find when they go to collect their money. Doors inevitably closed. Since the M23 rebel group took control a month ago in North Kivu's capital, the economy has been slowing down. The lack of cash is being felt on a daily basis, especially by people who have put their savings in banks and for small businesses.
It is urgent that the banks reopen so that we can withdraw money. Famine is starting to threaten because of cash shortage. Many people have received their salaries, but they cannot access them.
Lack of cash is a major problem, not to mention the fact that many shopkeepers have their shops looted, most employees are unemployed, and the banks are closed. We were going to take out loans from the bank, leaving the documents of the houses to relaunch the activities, but currently we can't do any of that.
The M23 has yet to announce its plan to relaunch the economic activity in Goma, and the central bank is still under state control in Kinshasa. Pending a viable solution, the people of Goma continue to endure the effects of this financial crisis, with no immediate prospect of improvement.
Well, staying with DRC, despite Rwanda being accused of supporting the M23, many Congolese have headed to Kigali, the Rwandan capital, to escape the violence at home. But despite the diplomatic frictions between the countries, artists of both nationalities have been trying to find their own ways to foster compassion and collaboration between themselves. Take a look.
Darrell grips his phone tightly. He's anxious. This dancer from Bukavu, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, fled the violence before the M23 rebels arrived.
Things are unclear politically speaking. It's not really very clear when I'm going back to Bukavu, but I try to check the news every day to see how things are going over there.
Like Darrell, many artists have taken refuge across the border in Rwanda, a country accused of backing the M23. Despite rising diplomatic tensions, this dance festival organizer believes that now, more than ever, cultural collaboration must continue.
Now is not the time to give up. Even if there are complicated political reasons, there's always this friendship between us and the dancers of Congo. And that's what it means to be an artist, to create this connection, this friendship, to see how we can inspire the world.
A friendship that Emmanuel from Kigali and Alobak from Goma embody in their performance Mitsi Mitsi.
It shows the resistance between two friends who really work together. I'm Rwandese, he's a Congolese, but we've been working together as just to reflect how friendship occurs.
We have a common language, which is dance. It's my way of sharing a message of peace, of living in resilience, despite everything that's happening back home.
Words that sharply contrast with the violences devastating the neighbouring country. Art has the power to unite, but it cannot prevent the fear of a new all-out conflict in the region.
Well, the G20 meeting of finance ministers has kicked off in Cape Town. Money is on everyone's mind as the world keenly follows the turbulence being caused by an unpredictable Washington. The US hasn't even been turning up to some of these gatherings of the world's leading economies, accusing the G20 of being anti-American. Tom Canetti breaks it all down for us.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa opened today's meeting under this year's G20 theme of solidarity, equality and sustainability. That's the theme that he's trying to rally world leaders around ahead of this November's summit. But solidarity certainly wasn't felt, with finance ministers from not only the US, but India, Japan and Canada all missing today's meeting. Sustainability will also be a tough one for Ramaphosa, with the Trump administration explicitly denouncing fighting against climate change as a G20 priority, while Ramaphosa is seeking more finance for climate resilience, particularly in Africa. The US freezing foreign aid has marked this shift in geopolitics, particularly in the developing world, and how development will be financed. So the heads of government and development banks have met today to discuss how that rethinking of development finance will look.
So it's a shock, of course, including somehow a macroeconomic shock for a few countries, especially in Africa. So the other players absolutely have to react. And true to say that in the world of development finance, Europe is 3 times bigger than the US. You know the figures, it's 60 billion on the US side. It's both development and humanitarian. But Europe, the European Union plus UK plus Norway is 150 billion euro, about 2/3 of total ODA, as we call it, in the world last year.
This is the first time an African nation has hosted the presidency of the G20, and South Africa has promised to prioritise inequality, sustainable development and food security, with African development at the heart of these discussions.
Well, the president of Guinea-Bissau was in the Kremlin on Wednesday, hosted by Russia's leaders. He continues to try and expand influence in Africa. Vladimir Putin met with his Guinean counterpart, Umaro Sissoko Embalo, on Wednesday, who reportedly said that a Russian aluminium company is interested in helping his country build a railway and port in exchange for bauxite exploration licenses. To Senegal now, where wheat and rice have long dominated the national diet, but faced with the unpredictability of global export and import markets and prices, traditional crops like the Fonio grain are growing increasingly popular, as Caitlin Kelly tells us.
At this agricultural cooperative near Salemata in southeastern Senegal, the grain Fonio is undergoing a transformation. Thanks to a modern 5-step system, a process that once required days of manual labour now takes just 30 minutes to produce 50 kilos of the cereal.
We used to eat fonio, but we didn't really know how to prepare or use it properly. Now we know that it brings us a lot of benefits, both in terms of nutrition and as a business.
In this region, which borders 2 other major fonio producers, Mali and Guinea, the grain has been identified as a key component of food security. NGO SOS Sahel has been supporting farmers with agricultural equipment to help boost production.
We now have up to 2,000 farmers involved, and demand keeps growing. Since Fonio is a rare grain with a short growing cycle, it gives farmers who run out of their stored harvest something to rely on, especially during the more difficult seasons.
Since the colonial period, when the French imported broken rice from Indochina, Senegal has remained dependent on rice imports. But now local fonio is becoming increasingly popular in parts of the country's west. Diariatu, a Malian student and restaurant owner, has lived in Senegal for 16 years and has made fonio her speciality. Selling online, her fonio-based dishes are in high demand in Dakar, due in part to the grain's nutritional properties.
Fonio has a lot of health benefits, especially for digestion. It's rich in calcium, magnesium, iron, and vitamins B1, B2, and B3. It's also gluten-free, which is great for people with gluten intolerance. And for diabetics, it's an excellent choice.
At around 2,000 CFA francs per kilo, 4 times the price of rice, fonio still remains a luxury for many in Senegal.
That's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
Since the start of the war in Ukraine, many Russians have fled to Serbia, seeking refuge from Putin's regime.
I was earlier enrolled in university in Moscow. Because of the war, it kind of stopped giving us the program that was promised initially.
These exiles make up 5 to 10% of the Serbian population and invest heavily in the country.
The conditions for doing business are also good, which is why we decided to stay here.
But in pro-Kremlin Serbia, political discussions remain taboo.
The pressure on the Russian anti-war movement in Serbia has had some effect. We can't mobilize large numbers because people don't want to risk their residency permits in the only country that welcomes them.
Watch Reporters on France 24 and France24.com. The history of our world is ever-changing. The flow of information is constantly increasing. We cover all subjects. We verify. We commit. On the ground, in all circumstances, to anticipate the future by understanding the present. We are with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. France 24, understanding the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.